So now in this video what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the IHS loop with the ohmic circuit in play. I plugged it in, it's got power, and I'm going to do the same thing I did before. Now if you remember, during the IHS loop, when I was driving the torch downwards, I was driving it to a point where this switch plate assembly would open up. As soon as it opens up, the meter will show, instead of 0 ohms, it's going to show basically infinity, okay? But now that I have, and that wouldn't happen, it did not happen at the point that the torch touched the material. No, torch touched the material. It happened at some point below the current top of the material because the material would flex, okay? And then the upward motion would start, the travel portion of the torch going up, and at that point, when those switch plate assemblies close again, that's when fire control determines or sinks in the top of the material for IHS control, or for torch height control, I should say. So I do have it in play. Now, if you remember, whenever those plates opened, this went to infinity, fire control would light this up, this display there. Oh, yeah, that wasn't what I wanted. What the heck? Oops. Hold on. Here we go. So this wouldn't, doesn't light up until those plates open. But I'm going to bring this down 1/8 inch step and wait for that to turn on. Okay. That tells fire control that the switch plate assembly on the C-axis assembly here is opened. But it hasn't. They're still closed. And the reason fire control sees that now is that the ohmic circuit is in play. The ohmic circuit has bypassed that switch assembly to tell fire control the torch has gone down far enough, it's traveled down far enough, and that's where you need to start your upwards motion of the torch. So now this is what I'm going to do. Even though that relay is open, I'm going to drive it down, the torch, I'm going to drive it down some more. Okay, again, IHS light is on, fire control says those plates are opened, I need to start my upwards travel on the torch. But if you look at the meter, those plates are still closed. So I'm going to drive the torch down more. And you're not going to be able to see it there, but that's one step. I'm going to drive it down again. That's another step. So that's a 1/4 inch downward motion that I move the torch even more. Here's another one. Now that's 1/8 of an inch, and you can see the meter change. So had I not had the ohmic circuit in play, these contacts here wouldn't have opened up until a 1/4 inch below the surface of where the material actually is at. And if you look over here, I mean, IHS light is still on because there's an open. Yeah, there's an open because my probe is touching. My ohmic probe over there is touching the metal, but also because the switch assembly up here has opened because I've driven the torch down another 1/4 inch. So you can see on the meter that's open. Now I'm going to drive this up, torch up 1/8. See that? And you can see that the switch contacts here closed already. So normally at this point, this is where fire control would say, hey, this is where the top of the material is. Even though as we move the torch up, the material is going to flex, okay? So I'm going to drive it up again, 1/8 of an inch, another 1/8 of an inch, and IHS is off. That means my probe is no longer touching the material, or just barely. It's not touching it at all right there. It's kind of hard to see here. So this is what I want. This is what I'm going to drive it up here 1/8 of an inch. I want the downward travel of the torch to stop as soon as my tip touches the metal, or in this case, my probe, okay? So I am going to bring it down an eighth of an inch at a time. You see the gap? You see how it touches now? It just barely touched. There's IHS. So fire control says, hey, start my upward motion of the torch so I can determine the height of the material. And look at the meter. That's still closed. Those switch assemblies, that switch assembly is still closed. So this is where this works. Okay, so even if it flexes, even if this material flexes right here, because as soon as the torch touches the metal, that probe is going to tell fire control, hey, I'm open, you need to start your upward travel.